Hello, my name is Jenna Sawatsky, and this presentation is on the analysis of rhetoric within the anthropology discourse. So to begin, I just want to give a brief background on what anthropology is as a discipline. Anthropology seeks to uncover principles of behavior that apply to all human communities. To an anthropologist, diversity itself, seen in body shapes and sizes, customs, clothing, speech, religion, and worldview, provides a frame of reference for understanding any single aspect of life in any given community. And this definition was taken from the American Anthropological Association. Also, crucial to know is that anthropology has 4 subdisciplines. Cultural focuses on the evolution of human societies. Linguistics studies how languages influence humans or vice versa. Archaeological studies human history and prehistory through artifact excavations such as bones, pottery, understanding where societies went and how they evolved through artifacts. And then biological is also known as physical anthropology, but it studies the biological and behavioral aspects of humans, primates, and our ancestors. Jane Goodall was a biological anthropologist. So, for the purpose of this analysis, the writings chosen were focused on the healthcare aspect of cultural anthropology. Because there is the 4 subdisciplines, naturally writings for each subdiscipline are going to vary a little bit. So I tried to pick some that were in the same subdiscipline so that my lines were a little clearer. So for the first article, I pulled it from the journal American Anthropologist. It's a very recent article from 2017. It's a qualitative analysis of how anthropologists interpret the race construct. The second article, also from American Anthropologist, is Acculturation and Health, the Moderating Role of Sociocultural Context. And then finally, from the journal Cultural Anthropology, also from 2017, Humanitarian Care and the Ends of Life, the Politics of Aging and Dying in a Palestinian Refugee Camp. So a lot of the structure and content in scholarly anthropology writing is kind of specific to what journal it came from. So in choosing 2 from the same journal and 1 from a different journal, it allowed me to pick out the true commonalities for the discourse. So for our first pattern, it's the structure and layout of the article itself, how it's written. Despite little differences in what journal it came from, all the articles I looked at had an abstract. It was usually italicized and centered, and it stood out from the rest of the text so that you could pick out what's important quickly. They began with introductions with a focus on a background of the topic or why something is an issue. And then when they got into the meat of the article, the research and the data, they had really clear ideas, and they signified a new idea by just a new heading that was usually bolded. I think that this structure appeals to the ethos and logos way of persuasion. So it's set up so that most of the writing was explaining research and data. And then the introduction and conclusion were very brief. Also at the end, kind of also for the ethos of the author, there's an acknowledgments and notes section in all of the articles. So it's important for anthropologists to establish their credibility. In their acknowledgments, they often say who funded their research, and that's important in knowing if research is credible or if it maybe is a little skewed. Also, who they worked with. That's important in anthropology because there are different thought pools within the discourse. Some people use evolutionary theory and some anthropologists don't use evolutionary theory. So knowing what thought pool that specific author belongs to is important in understanding. And then notes. In many journals, there's a word count that the author can't go beyond, but they might need to elaborate an idea further They usually do that by footnoting it, and then in the notes section, they often explain that idea further, sometimes 1 to 2 more paragraphs. And then also, usually anthropology articles are really well researched. One of my articles had 100 citations at the end, and it's important for the credibility once again. These are just screenshots of the abstracts. You can see they're italicized and they're centered. They look a little different than what the rest of the text looks like. And then here's also an example of the notes section with the acknowledgments in the beginning of the notes. There was actually a page and a half more of notes on this article. All right, so pattern number 2, I actually mentioned a little bit already. The anthropology discourse focuses a lot on research and data, and they emphasize this often with graphs, tables, images, and these can all be from various sources. It could be data from opposing studies, or it can be data that's primary generated by the author for the purpose of this article. So here's some examples of a table, a little infographic flow chart. And then here's another infographic, and you can see they've explained the meaning of it below, italicized, set out separate from the text. And then here's an image from the third article, which is about the Palestinian refugee camps. And so also an important idea along with the research and data, and within anthropology as a discourse alone when you're looking at the writings, is that anthropologists have to, especially in the health genre, because often they're appealing to some public health crisis. They're wanting to institute a change, or they're wanting to draw attention to something that is maybe unjust. And so the way information is presented in scholarly anthropology writings is really varied based off of who the audience is. In the first article I chose, that's a qualitative analysis, it's kind of written by anthropologists for anthropologists, versus the third article, which is written on the humanitarian care in these Palestinian refugee camps. It's kind of more wanting to tug on your heartstrings a little bit than the first article. So pattern number 3 is that the anthropology discourse is jargon dependent. So there's discipline-specific vocabulary, and this kind of leads to the sentence structure of the articles being brief and specific. They say a term, they don't really explain the term. They also kind of expect that you know a little bit about the background of what they're talking about. In the third article about Palestine, you kind of need to know where Palestine is. You kind of need to know what's going on there to understand why the author is arguing for this issue or this change. And then once again it follows the pattern that anthropology is very audience dependent when they write. So to elaborate further with this, I just pulled some examples from the text. In the first article, they cite the race concept. Many people don't know that there is such a thing as a race concept, or that there's disagreement within anthropologists about race and how people are classified. Is it really a biological variation, etc.? Also, anthropologists use genetic data a lot. Often this references mitochondrial DNA or just regular DNA, and they're very different, and so you might need to know the difference. And then sometimes they just use terms ethnocultural. An anthropologist would know what it is, and maybe someone else wouldn't. So in conclusion, anthropologists tend, as I say, to have a brief conclusion paragraph. The audience makes a huge difference. The research really matters, and the vocabulary really matters. You need to have a background knowledge to understand what the author is trying to say, what point they're trying to persuade you towards. And so it's important to be educated in the topic in order to understand the writings. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you all have a good day.